Hello everyone, welcome to Mind Blowing Health and Wellness with Violet. Today I'm going to talk about how if we don't understand what we're trying to accomplish, we fail miserably. I'm going to use weight as the example, but there's lots of examples of this. I have so many people that come into my office and they have problems that they're trying to solve, but they really just don't know what question they need to ask to solve that problem. They don't know if they're causing the issue or if the issue is coming from somewhere else, like some other person or from a work structure. The reason I make these videos is that I really want to help everyone to live the life that they want to live, to be happy and be fulfilled. And so we're going to tackle this question, and I'm going to help you to understand what you can do to solve weight issues and any other questions, problems that you have in your life by looking at the right elements of the issue, right? You have to ask the right question. So when it comes to weight, and I'm going to use myself as the example because I think it's so clear when you look at my story, how asking the right question led to the better answer. So the whole reason that I found the ketogenic way of life was because I had a hip issue. So let's back up in history. It started off with me having a hip issue and going from a very active person to a person who was recognizing that as winter approaches, with the way that my hip was feeling, I wasn't going to be able to ski or snowboard this year, that year. I had already minimized my longboarding for the summer. I had already minimized my bike riding for the summer, trying to heal my hip. And so I was becoming afraid that I would not be able to snowboard. That's my favorite thing to do. So what ended up happening is I decided the obvious answer must have been, I'm a little bit overweight. Let me lose some weight. The pressure on my hip will go away and I will feel better. So I did all the conventional things to lose weight. I started to exercise more. I started to eat less. So a lot of motion, movement, never sitting still, decreased my intake. And 6 months later, I had lost 0 pounds. You can imagine the frustration because now we'd crossed through snowboard season. I still went, but in excruciating pain, and that wasn't a smart thing to do. So coming into the next spring, so we're talking about the month of February, the beginning of February actually, to be more precise, I started to do some research because I recognized that what was happening in my hip was inflammation. So I researched, how do you cure inflammation? And I found 2 very interesting pieces of information. The first piece of information was that carbohydrates are highly inflammatory in your body. Okay. The second piece of information I found was man-made vegetable oils are highly inflammatory in your body. Okay. Well, over the course of the following month, I would say month and a half, I did a lot of research to verify this because honestly, I'd never heard that before, that carbohydrates and man-made oils were very highly inflammatory. After a month and a half of research and finding all kinds of information that seemed to support the idea that eating carbohydrates, so any kind of sugar or starch or grain or like all the carbohydrates was inflammatory. And after researching and finding out that vegetable oil, canola oil, margarine, peanut oil, soy oil, like any unnatural oil was also inflammatory, April 20th, well, actually the week before April 20th, I decided it looks like I need to eliminate these things from my life. So finally, I had the correct question, what's causing my inflammation? And I had the correct answer, which is carbohydrates and vegetable oil, from everything I could figure out. So I took carbohydrates out of my life. I started with that because it was the simplest thing to remove, right? I just didn't go grocery shopping and I allowed all of that food to be eaten out of the house. And then when I did go grocery shopping, I bought nutrient-dense vegetables and I bought high quality proteins. And that's what I started with. I just had whatever meat and vegetable I was going to have for supper. And I planned myself out a week of eating. And I figured the next weekend, if I didn't like what I had, I can always make some adjustments if I didn't like what I had. So I had a week's worth of meals to go through from one weekend to the next. So I began on April 20th, 2018. And so what happened was a week in, I didn't really feel much different, but I didn't expect to. A week in terms of my hip. Um, Going through the first week was actually rather difficult because what I had not anticipated was how badly I would have wanted carbohydrates. And so how miserable I would have felt. On the third day of eating this new way, I had a very difficult time. So just full disclosure, I had an extremely difficult third, fourth, and fifth day. But what I learned doing some more research about what happens when you remove carbs from your diet, which was the next thing I researched, and I had glimpses of this along the way, but I was so focused on getting rid of the inflammation, I think I wasn't paying enough attention to what would happen when I took the carbs out, was that I learned that it's super important, first of all, to keep your fat intake high, so which I was not so focused on, and recognizing that you would have withdrawal symptoms, which is what I felt like I was having. And the suggestion was to raise your fats and plow through. So that's what I did. I raised my fats. What I actually did was I bought coconut milk and I just started adding that to my coffee, about a tablespoon to my coffee. And by day 5, I was feeling better. And by day 6, I was really better. So I had like 3 days. So 3, 4, and 5 were uncomfortable days. And the 7th day, I was back to feeling like normal. So after 2 weeks of eating that way, my hip continued to have some discomfort, but it was feeling slightly less painful. Now, I want to go back and I want to mention one thing. During the 6 to 9 months, I think it was more like 9 months, that I was walking. So throughout the summer, I started in the end of the summer, and throughout the winter, I had been doing a lot of walking, especially. I added a lot of walking to my exercise regime. And during that time, the thing that I did notice is that on the days that I was able to walk for about an hour, my hip felt better longer through the day than on days that I could only walk for 20-ish minutes or so. And that's more to do with my schedule. So I had continued walking even after starting this new diet, even though I hadn't lost anything, just because walking helped my hip to feel so much better. What I did notice is that the walking was still helping. So through the process of changing my foods, after 2 weeks and walking, I was still feeling the same. But about a month in, so a month after taking carbohydrates out of my diet, I noticed that my hips started to feel better. So right away, again, we look at it. When you ask the right question, removing carbohydrates, all of a sudden things started to change and shift. And I actually noticed a difference in my hip feeling better. The other thing that I did notice during this period of time, so that first month, April 20th to May 20th, was that I lost weight. I wasn't trying to lose weight. My whole goal was help my hip feel better. But I lost weight. And just for clarity, during the period of time that my hip was hurting me, as you heard me mention, I continued to do my activities, which probably wasn't the smartest thing in the world, but I never stopped doing my activities. I had not gained weight during that period of time. My weight stayed stable. So just for clarity, then I actually upped my exercise and workouts for 9 months and I lost nothing. But in the month of April, going from April 20th to May 20th, I lost weight, which I thought was interesting. I knew that from the research that I had done in the first week, that 8 pounds that I lost was water weight. But the weeks that followed, which had still impressive numbers of weight being lost, so it continues. So basically, in that first month, I lost quite a bit of weight. And my hip started to feel better. By 3 months in, my hip was fine. Actually, I would even say that probably like 1.5 to 2 months in, my hip was so dramatically better that at a few different occasions, people asked me how my hip was doing, and I actually forgotten that my hip was bothering. And then the times that I would notice it the most would have been when I was climbing stairs. So after 2 months, if I wasn't climbing stairs, I didn't notice it. And by the 3rd month, my hip issue had been eliminated. Now, just again, because I want to make sure that people understand what I'm trying to show you here, I asked the right question. What causes inflammation? Well, guess what? I had other inflammation issues happening in my body that I wasn't as focused on changing, only because they weren't affecting me as much as the hip issue was affecting me. So the other issues that I had a back problem, I had knee issues, I had a neck stiffness issue, and I was beginning to get what I thought was the beginning of arthritis in my hands, because I was noticing I had issues with my hands when I woke up in the morning, as my mom reported to me sometimes having, and she has that. What I did do was I continued to move forward, and not only did I remove the inflammatory carbs, I did dramatically decrease the oil. So I went out and I purchased coconut oil, avocado oil, and olive oil. And I decided to start using those things for cooking, etc. Now, to look at the grand scheme of things, like I said, within 3 months, the hip issue was gone. I would also say that my back felt dramatically better. My knees felt normal again. My neck strain issues I was no longer feeling that. However, I would say that it took a little bit longer for my back to feel great. Like today, my back feels terrific. As a matter of fact, today I have no signs of any kind of inflammatory anything. So we asked the right question, we got the right answer. Interestingly, accidentally, by asking the question, what causes inflammation, I also learned what causes weight gain. So carbohydrates play a big role also in weight gain. Inflammation plays a big role in retention of water, and when you retain water, you weigh more. So in my effort to find the right question, I learned something about weight loss. But here's to take this another step further. When we ask the question, what causes weight gain and how do you lose weight? I want to point out that when we ask that question, we don't actually look for the right answer. So what I mean by that is, most people believe that weight gain is caused by eating too many calories, period. And although I will agree that if you eat too many calories, of course you're going to gain weight, the definition of what's too many calories is what I'm going to argue with. So for clarity, today, sitting here in front of you, I weigh less than I weighed 9 months ago, 10 months ago. And yet, today, sitting here in front of you, I eat more calories than I used to eat 10 months ago. So how's that possible? Well, it's possible because I've actually asked the question, what causes weight gain? And guess what? The answer wasn't eating extra calories, period. It was eating excessive carbohydrates, because when you eat excessive carbohydrates, that raises your insulin. And when you raise your insulin, you end up in a hormone situation that pushes you to overeat. And therefore, you end up eating, of course, too many calories. Interestingly enough, you can also eat fewer calories and still gain weight, because when you eat too many carbohydrates and your insulin levels are pushed to a certain level because your sugar in your system is pushed to a certain level, insulin's job is to take the extra sugar circulating in your bloodstream and store it safely as fat, because carbohydrates circulating in your bloodstream, extra carbohydrates circulating in your bloodstream, is toxic. So when we ask the right question, what causes us to gain weight? Well, then we notice that insulin plays a very large role in what's considered too many calories. Because if I eat the same amount of calories from fats rather than from carbs, my insulin system doesn't get turned on. And so therefore I don't start storing these calories as fat, because fat circulating in my system isn't dangerous. You need to ask the right question in order to get the right solution. So the right solution is decrease the amount of carbohydrates that you eat, and you will likely lose weight, which is exactly what happened to me accidentally. I was trying to solve an inflammation issue and ended up solving an inflammation issue and a weight issue just by making that small change. I really hope that this, first of all, helps you to understand that every time you want to solve a problem, you need to find the right question. So you need to understand the problem correctly so that you can solve it. And the other thing I hope that this helps you to understand is that if you would like to solve a weight problem, you need to look at it more as a health problem, because if you understand why it's unhealthy for you to eat certain things, what your body is trying to do, then you'll be able to solve the problem, because then you'll understand what your body's doing and you'll be able to eat foods that allow your body to use the energy appropriately rather than quickly trying to store it away where it won't damage your system. I really hope you found this video helpful, because I love making these videos for you guys, and I want to make sure that everyone has the opportunity to live the happy life that they want to live. And by me making these videos, I hope that I help to show you that there are things you can do to improve your life. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next video.